Hello and welcome to live coverage of the 10th and final round of the 2017 Audi R8 LMS Cup season. Sean, it's been a fantastic year, and what a story yesterday with the young local amateur driver David Chen taking victory.
That was a great success story. It highlighted a couple of things, one of which was dramas to the drivers who had qualified ahead of him, but additionally that on a new circuit where there's a level playing field, the Cup is so competitive and so close that an AM driver like David Chen, who lives just an hour down the road, can come here the first time for him too, and take victory. That was a great result for the 9th round of the championship.
And it's worth saying that even though he is a local driver, it's a brand new track. This week was the first time. He didn't have any local knowledge. They didn't let him come in during the building of the track to take some test runs. So he was new to the track just like everyone else. Even more impressive given that.
Absolutely, and we saw even bringing Jake Dennis in, the new recruit to the championship, driving for the Castrol Racing team and WRT. He's come over from Europe, was blisteringly fast during practice and qualifying, but struck dramas off the start yesterday, and that was pretty interesting, and that created all sorts of drama at the front of the pack, and we'll see how it goes today. The other thing that was a highlight about the new Zhejiang circuit is that it's very difficult to overtake, very tight, relatively short, good elevation change, but overtaking opportunities very, very limited. And we're talking to David Chen earlier about that. Sean Dong put him under a fire, and that made it very, very interesting.
Thanks very much, Sean. Well, we can join Sophie, who's down on the grid now, with Martin Kuhl.
Marty, what a fantastic weather today. And based on the circuit structure and what happened yesterday, how do you think the start is going to change the race today, and especially something that our viewers can watch?
Well, we had a great race yesterday. There was a lot of action, overtaking. The circuit seems to suit the drivers, although it's the first time they're all here. Yes, there was an accident at the start yesterday. I guess the drivers will be a bit more careful today going into the first turn. But, I mean, you never know. For sure, after yesterday, we expect another very close race. And as you know, the P2 and P3 are still wide open for the overall championship. So there are 4 drivers in contention, and they will try the best to end the season on the podium.
Thanks a lot, and we would just wish all the drivers good luck and have a fabulous race today. Now it's our time, cross back to you guys.
Thanks, Sophie. Well, Alessio Picariello, of course, wrapped up the title one race weekend early in Shanghai last time out, but the battle for second is, well, it's going right down to the wire. We have Frankie Chang, Alex Young, Sean Thong and Mitch Gilbert all within 8 points of each other in that race for second. Who's the favourite in your mind, Sean?
Well, Sean Thong yesterday finished second, and he was strong enough to get to victory. He couldn't get past David Chen cleanly, and that was one of the highlights again. Meanwhile, you saw a couple of the other drivers further back, and of course Mitch and Frankie had dramas on that start. And I think before we get too further into this program, we'll see some of the footage from yesterday, and you'll see exactly why we've got a mixed grid. Some of the drivers are facing penalties after qualifying for today's race. It's going to be a very much a mixed bag. But for me, I think Sean Thong was very strong yesterday. He's one to really keep a close eye on. But Mitch Gilbert, I think, has got a little bit of ground that he wants to make up too.
And he does start from pole position. So interestingly, the bottom 2 of that pack of 4 actually perhaps have the advantage given what's happened here so far. We can look at yesterday's highlights now and see all the action.
Talk about this.
David Chen, I mean, we already talked about his performance, but it's so impressive. And he starts from the front row of the grid today. He actually qualified in 3rd position, but Jake Dennis, after the incident we had that you just saw in the highlights there, has a 5-place grid penalty. So he starts from 6th position after qualifying the fastest of the grid. Mitch Gilbert and David Chen are the front row.
That will be very, very interesting. And I think when we go back to the discussion about in that 8 points separating second to fifth in the championship, Mitch is effectively in the box seat, because the one thing yesterday highlighted was, okay, there was drama at the start, but once David Chen got ahead, which he did very nicely, Sean Thong was able to get up to second quite quickly, but he'd only made up one position to get there as a result of that incident, but he couldn't get past. He tried, he got alongside at one stage, he came through the final corner and he was just in front, but David had him covered. The other thing that David's got to his advantage is push to pass. He's got twice as many as Mitch Gilbert and the other pro drivers, so that's going to be very, very interesting to see how they use that.
Now, Sean, it is a standing start for the second race of the weekend. David Chen also said to us that he is on the inside line. Does that give him an advantage over Mitch?
Well, he perceives that, so certainly it's be very interesting. But let's go down to Sophie. She is on the grid with the man who won round 9 of the championship, TSRT's David Chen.
David just take the win yesterday at the same time with 50 kg in your car. You're starting from second place today. How is your strategy at the same time? How many times you race here? It seems you're very experienced.
Not really. This is my first time, so I think it's just the fact that everyone is driving the new track, and somehow this track suits my driving style. And today, for sure, 50 kilos will play a role, so I will try to hold my position as long as possible.
Good luck for you, David. And now it's time to cross back to our panel.
Well, the point that Sophie made there, 50 kgs in the car. This is something that's obviously brand new for David as an amateur driver. That's going to be a big, tough moment for him to adjust to.
Well, absolutely it will. So that is something to consider as well in this equation. So interestingly too, talking to the drivers earlier in the weekend, this is a brand new circuit. It's the first time most of them have been here, even the local driver. First time for him. But they were saying you need to be more aggressive. Alessio Picariello said that Mitch Gilbert's got the edge on him here because he throws the car around more than Alessio. Alessio likes to get the flow up in the car, more finesse, better on his tyres and all that sort of thing. But he said this circuit doesn't reward that. So here we are, Zhejiang circuit, opened at the end of 2016, 3.2 kilometres, just under, 16 turns, relatively short main straight and very busy through from turns 2 all the way through to turn 13 effectively, and then from 13 through to 16 and across the start-finish line again, it's a little bit more flow and a little bit more pace.
Well, Sean, we mentioned that David Chen will line up just slightly behind Mitch Gilbert on the front row of the grid. The next three drivers, Alessio Picariello, the champion for this year already. Martin Rump is fourth. And then we have Frankie Chang. Alongside him is Jake Dennis, who, as we said, he's qualified the fastest of both the two races. He's going to have pace. No weight in his car. He's a guest driver, of course, this weekend. But it's the first time he's done a standing start in a GT3 car. Is that going to be a big issue for him? Could
be. And in fact, he said yesterday, and the reason why he got caught up in that incident, he said he expected to see some green lights come on when the red lights went out at the start. Of course, he was at Chengdu with China GT 3 days ago. Won a race there in an Audi, finished on the podium in the second race, 2 one-hour races. They had green lights. So he said, the lights went out and I paused and realised Mitch had gone, but he said, when you pause in a field like that, it's all over. And he said, they swamped me and then everything happened. He said, I moved across slightly into turn 1 to get a better line, didn't realise Alessio was there. That started the whole process and the chain reaction that led to retirements, including his, on the exit of turn 1, and that really changed the dynamic of the race. And I think given that, he will have that consideration if he hasn't done a standing start before, and I guess that might play a little bit on his mind. But a very experienced driver. We'll get to that a little bit later.
Yeah, there's got to be some nerves creeping in. He's not going to want to waste this weekend after 2 great qualifying performances, and of course, driving fast all weekend long. He needs to put in a good performance for the race today.
And he'll be battling the man who has won the 2017 champion. That is, of course, Alessio Picariello, who had a DNF in yesterday's race.
Alessio already took the over champion, so seems to be a little bit relaxed today. So what, you're gonna push harder, or some other strategy you can share with us today?
Well, for me, actually, it doesn't change much from a normal weekend. The pressure is always the same, is to be on top everywhere we go. It's a bit kind of a difficult weekend for us, but no, I'm not that relaxed. I'm just focused on the race and I want to finish on a high, so let's see what will happen.
Thanks a lot, Alessio, and now it's our time. Back to you guys.
Sean, one thing we haven't talked about today, the Phoenix Racing team struggled all weekend. We've got Alex Young again, qualifying on the 5th row of the grid. He's going to have 25 kgs in his car from 9th position. How far can he climb up through the field?
I'm not sure he can climb too far at all, and that's got nothing to do with his ability. The winningest driver, 22 wins in 66 starts for the Cup, or 67 as it stands now. So he knows how to win in this race. This highlights again the circuit, very difficult to get past. Don't worry too much about the weight. I don't think that's the consideration. The consideration is the style of the circuit. And you asked the question of David Chen earlier. Do you have to drive a more protective line with a car behind you, or because it is narrow and a busy circuit, can you just rely on following the race line? He rightly said it's a bit of a combination of both, but there aren't big opportunities for an experienced driver to get past. So that's why the start will be so important. That's going to be the big key. And if Mitch Gilbert's got it and he can get off the line the way he has done so far this year, he could almost be a shoo-in for victory, and it would be his first this year.
Now, KOU, the South Korean driver, starts from the back of the grid. He got a 10-place grid penalty for his involvement in that carnage at the start yesterday. KO's always in the action, isn't he? I mean, obviously it's not great for him that he's got that penalty, but
no.
From a neutral, objective point of view, there's always action when KO's on the track.
He's always entertaining. We know that about him. We love that about him. And you couldn't, I don't think, attribute too much of yesterday's accident. There were other things that were happening in front of him. He's trying to get a little bit of advantage off the line. You think you see a window. Jake Dennis said, I made a delayed start. I moved across, didn't even know Alessio was there. I put Alessio into someone else, and this is how it all wound up. So it makes it very difficult. Everything's happening so quickly, and sometimes you make the wrong reaction. We talk about visibility in a GT3 car. You're sitting low, you're sitting back. It's not as simple as a road car driving down the main street. There's a lot of things that they have to consider, and it's all happening very quickly.
Now, Sean, let me ask you, we're just about 2-3 minutes away from race time here at the Zhejiang circuit. This is the final race of the year. They're going to want to leave it all out there. Can we expect more carnage at the start, or are they going to be more tentative because of what happened yesterday?
They're all racers. Listening to Alessio down on the grid, he doesn't think about things like pressure. He doesn't think about championship. He's just a racer. I want to win race. Every start is a new beginning. That's what they want to go after. You've got drivers like Marchi Lee, the 2012 Cup champion, Alex Jung, a 3-time Cup champion. They're a little bit further back in the field, but more than capable of winning. It depends on how they feel on the day. We talk about Frankie Chang in the middle of the year taking that victory at Suzuka. Once you get your mojo back, you can achieve just about anything, but it is going to be interesting. It is the last round of the championship. Championship's over. So now it's just a matter of going out the gate and racing. And I don't think they actually planned for carnage. I don't think they want it any more than Audi wants to see it. But we want to see some good racing. They also know, as a result of yesterday, and I'll stop talking in a minute, as a result of yesterday, having an incident like that in the first corner, well, you're not going to complete the next 16, 17, 18 laps, are you? You're sidelined. So what's the point of racing if you're going to wipe yourself out off the start?
Well, Sean, it's the traditional time in the programme when I put you on the spot. Who is going to win this race today?
Mitch Gilbert.
There you go. Starting
the Australian Mitch Gilbert.
Who's sort of British and Malaysian as well. We're going to have to ask him about that.
He was Malaysian yesterday, but given that he's going to win
this argument once and for all.
He's going to win today, so he's Australian. No, he's certainly. We like to adopt Australians. They don't have to be born there. You could just have landed there. Been there 5 minutes, and we'll have them. Sent over, yes, thank you.
Well, he starts from pole position, and alongside him, as we said, the local driver, David Chen, amateur driver, unbelievably, after yesterday, and again qualified well today, but he has that 50 kilograms. Not an ideal passenger
it's not.
in the seat next to you.
No, it's not, because it's a standing start. You have to actually get off the line, and you're carrying that additional weight with you to get rolling. So that will make...
Another thing that might make it even harder is, of course, the elevation here, going up that hill with the extra weight. We'll wait to see.
Well, the standing start, stopping the cars rolling, but stopping them rolling back. So depending on how quickly they give the start, you could see a couple of minor issues. We've seen it with some of the TCR racing here this weekend. Of course, Audi involved in that as well. And there has been a lot of incidents on track in the various different championship races. So getting ready for a start. This is the warm-up, getting some tyre temperature. Mitch Gilbert's laid a little bit of rubber in which he'll hope to get a bit of grip to get a start. Now, what Alessio Picariello is doing there, he's not just on show for the girls. It was certainly about getting tyre temperature into these Control Pirelli slick tyres. Of course, that was a new addition to the 2017 championship, was the addition of Pirelli as the tyre supplier. So they're trying to get temperature into the tyres, get ready for the start, and certainly the hotter and stickier you can make those Pirelli slicks before the start, the better chance you have of getting off the line into turn one and carrying a little bit more pace into the first stages of the race. The only unfortunate thing for many of the guys at the front of the field is the other drivers around them have that experience to draw on as well. So I'm sure that's not going to provide the greatest of advantage, but the whole point of this weaving and starting and stopping and spinning wheels off the line to get started is to try and get those tyres to temperature.
And we've seen some differences with the tyres and how they've adapted to the tyres, particularly at this circuit between the service teams. Just talk about the differences that we've seen, Sean.
With the service teams, well, 4 different service teams this year: WRT, KCMG, Absolute Racing, and of course Phoenix Racing Asia are supporting the teams in this championship. We'll get to which teams are those. You were talking a little bit earlier about Phoenix Racing Asia. As a team, were suffering a little bit with getting temperature into the tyres. It's not about the car setup. Well, it's a little bit about car setup because that will attribute to the tyre temperature and making the tyres work. But as a team, they were struggling a little bit. Some of the other teams are a little bit further forward. Absolute Racing this year, of course, Alessio Picariello, the MGT team by Absolute driver. He can take advantage of the knowledge that Mitch Gilbert, Frankie Chang have around this circuit. They can apply all that data, and that moves them all further forward. So if all 3 of your drivers, as we've seen a little this weekend with Phoenix Racing Asia, are struggling a bit to get that done, unless one of them can find a window and they actually start to move forward. There's the 2014 Cup champion, Adley Fong. Unless one of them in the team can find that magic solution, it's going to be difficult to move them all forward. So we'll see how this one plays out. Certainly, Sean Thong yesterday, 2nd, and Alex Young, the reigning champion, was 3rd. 2013 Cup champion. Thank you for that. I'm waiting.
Wasn't going to throw you under the
yeah,
bus,
I was
Sean.
waiting Okay, all right, strike one. It's a long day.
Generally can't count, but let's get to the race.
Okay, so we're getting ready to go. Green flags through. I'm not sure what's going on with Mitch. That's Martin Rump, perhaps, that's out of position. That's unusual.
He's lined up in the wrong
Something's going.
boxes.
He has. Well, we'll see how that goes. Red lights on. We'll see if we get ready for a start. The final round of the 2017 Championship is underway. The reason he was out of line is he stalled on the grid or has been unable to make a start. But up front, Mitch Gilbert's got pole. Alessio has squeezed through on. Oh, he's squeezed through on David Chen and gone down the inside. A little bit deep into turn 1. 3 wide's not going to work through turn 2. He's cut through the cut through. That could come back and bite him a little bit afterwards. Very messy first 2 turns here for the final round of the championship. And Alessio Picariello leads through to turn 3.
Well, no crashes this time, apart from, of course, that stall on the line from Martin Rump, but definitely some drama. Alessio, a great start from him, starting from 3rd position on the grid, but perhaps he's going to have to give a place back after cutting that corner, it appeared to be, and we'll take a replay of that a little bit later on.
You do see often in major motor racing championships when there is a bottleneck down to turn 1, sometimes to avoid a collision, they will give you some allowance to actually run off the circuit and perhaps through a chicane like that. So Alessio was avoiding contact. 3 wide, we pointed that out as they went into turn 1, was never going to work. So he may get away with that. Good to see. That looks like Martin Rump in the champion racing team entry at the rear of the field. But that highlights the tough year and the tough season that the young man from Estonia has had in 2017.
Well, Jake Dennis has moved up 2 places from starting in 6th up to 4th position, of course, passing Martin Rump, but also Frankie Chang is another man that he's got past.
Interestingly, we'll get to it a little bit later, but talking to David Chen about the addition of push to pass and using it, he has twice as many as the pro drivers around him. There's this replay off the start. Yeah, really, Alessio had nowhere to go.
Got bumped, yep.
And on the exit of turn 2, you can see that barrier that's on the inside. We've seen in a couple of the TCR races when they have tried to go 2 and 3 wide through their ends. Oh, that's Sean Thong, the right front. No, that's just contact damage, and it doesn't look like a big issue, but he's allowed his team, well, he's between his 2 teammates. Marchi Lee behind, and Alessio spun. Alessio Picariello has spun. The championship points leader, the reigning champion, or the new champion for this year, is off the circuit. Not quite sure where that is. Whether he was helped, whether he fell, or whether he was pushed, I guess we'll find out a little bit later on. But he's now back with Jeffrey Lee, the driver he spends a lot of time working with. Let's take a look. He's just lost the rear of the car from the lead of this race. That is very unusual. Now, let's hope something isn't broken in the rear of the 15 MGT team by Absolute car. He's got going again, but he's back with his good mate Jeffrey Lee further down the order, and that is towards rear of field. So frustration to go from the lead of this race. That hands the lead back to Mitch Gilbert, as now that's Jake Dennis is up to position 2. Good on David Chen, giving the young Englishman a little bit of racing room, and he could have closed the door there yesterday, as he did yesterday with Sean Thong battling for the lead of this race. But he probably feels he doesn't quite have the pace being shown by Jake Dennis right now. And now Mitch Gilbert's got a little bit of a hurry on. The Australian is running away at the front of this field.
Well, this is going to be a fantastic race at the front. These two have consistently been the quickest all weekend long. Neither of them have any weight in the car, so this is going to be a straight race to the flag. But going back with Alessio Picariello.
Sean Thong, it does seem to be a little bit of tyre smoke, so I'm tipping that car's not quite handling well. It could be that the front splitter, the front spoiler on the Audi Tita Racing entry is actually rubbing on the right front tyre. That could cause Sean a greater problem. So the team needs to have a bit of a look at that. I'm sure that's what he was doing, weaving, just trying to find out what the real issue is there. And they may well call the number 8 entry down pit lane. And that's devastating for his championship hopes, because he's battling the man who's leading this race now, Mitch Gilbert. They were 8 points back from second. And of course, currently second in the championship is Frankie Chang. Frankie is 4th, I think, in this race, back behind David Chen. So that will move him up 2 in the championship race.
Well, as things stand, it looks like Mitch is going to clinch second place, but a long way to go from now. But I was just talking about Alessio Picariello. It does happen to the best of them with that spin. It's going to be interesting to see how far up the field that he can climb. He's up to 10th already, so he's from pretty much at the back.
I don't know. He's been very, very clean this year. That was an unusual spin. We've not seen spins there like that so far this year. It could have been a tyre temperature thing, but I think maybe there's something more of a problem. Having said that, he's just set the fastest first sector of this lap and is back to position number 10. Last time round, 1:41. Yeah, okay, so the pace at the front of the field, Mitch Gilbert doing 1:27.4, fastest lap of the race so far, 1:27.1 to Jake Dennis, the young Englishman, the number 19 entry. I've seen a couple of drivers behind the wheel of the Castrol Racing Team entry this year. Stefan Riquelme was behind the wheel for the first few rounds. Then last time round, Dries Van Thor, he took a victory and a couple of pole positions, the young Belgian driver. And this time round, it's the young Englishman from the WRT factory Audi team in Europe, or factory supported, of course, Audi Sport Customer Racing Team in Europe, and he's here this weekend. Has come straight off a victory and a podium finish in an Audi in the China GT Championship, and straight here to the first race at Zhejiang, and is doing very, very nicely.
He is doing very nicely indeed. In fact, he's just set the fastest lap of this race, 1:27.174 in the third lap, and as you can see, right on the tail of the Australian, British, Malaysian Mitch Gilbert. And this is a scrap at the front.
It's only the accent that's English, and I've got to take him out the back and slap him around a little bit. He's got to stop playing up. It sounds like an Australian, mate. Come on, get on with it. But he's doing a very good job at the front of this field, and he needs this too. He's had a tough year racing with the OD Racing Team, and that's not the team's issue. It's not supported, of course, by Absolute Racing. It's just been unlucky. He's been in a position where he has the pace, but little things have gone wrong, involved in incidents, some of which aren't his responsibility, but it just hasn't gone together. In contrast to that, you've got Alessio Picariello, who just was basically untouchable all year, had a dream run. He comes to Zhejiang, and if this had been earlier in the championship, this would have come all the way down to the wire, because he's not put a foot wrong, but this weekend has not had good luck so far.
Well, Marchie Lee has dropped it down a couple of places. Don't know if there's an issue for him at the back. That has, well, yes, now he is at the back, so perhaps he's had to retire.
Oh, Sean Thong too is run off, and you see that damage to the right side of the car.
Yeah.
So there's been some contact somewhere. It may have been in the early laps or off the start. He finished second yesterday. You can see it there, left of the left side at the front. Oof. He's lost dive planes and things. I'd say there's a little bit of tyre wear issue. And it could be the tyre's gone down. You see the 35-kilo sticker on the side. As a result of finishing second yesterday, he takes that 35-kilo success ballast into this race, and that looks a little bit more terminal. It's not handling too well, so he might just pull it to the side of the circuit. There's Marchie Lee. Yep. So 2 of the Phoenix Racing Asia cars are out. And we will see both of them back next weekend right here for the final round of Blancpain GT Series Asia, where they, Sean Thong and Marchie Lee, are the championship points leaders coming into the last round. So here, having valuable experience on this circuit for next weekend will have played nicely into their hands. So it's not all lost for them right now, but certainly for Sean, I think we can rule out him being second overall in the 2017 season.
That's right, Mitch Gilbert in the driving seat in this race, and also in that battle for second overall, behind, of course, the champion Alessio Picariello, who is now up to 7th place after dropping right to the back of the field. So he's now passed, of course, Sean and Marchi, who had those retirements, but also KOU. Next in his sights is Martin Rump, who is in 6th. So Alessio continues his charge after that spin earlier in the race.
Yeah, how is his progress going? 7th, right? Okay, so he's back on it. So it's a very unusual thing to see. Certainly a driver who has not put a foot wrong all year to be involved in a spin like that. Certainly from the front of the field. Very conservative driver, very calculating driver. Again, he lost the 2016 championship to Alex Young by a solitary point. And that was with only 1 victory out of 12 rounds. So he was able to put a championship together. There's the second of the Phoenix Racing Asia entries in pit lane. The number 8 Tita Racing machine of Sean Thong. So frustration for that team. We look at the other team entry, of course, Alex Young, the outgoing champion, 2014, 15, 16 champion, is currently in position number 5.
Now, Sean, let me ask you a question here. The push to pass comes into play for these two at the front. This is something that is new for Jake Dennis coming into the series as a guest driver. You can see 4 on Mitch's car, 5 for Jake. So, of course, he has a slight advantage there, but he's not experienced in how to use them, when to use them. How's that going to play into this final stages?
I think you can pretty much work that out. When you're a driver at that caliber, you are able to make those assertions very, very quickly. And talking yesterday, or in fact this morning, to David Chen, he made a very interesting point. He said coming out of the faster corners where it's 10 seconds of an additional 50 horsepower, 585 horsepower Audi R8 LMS GT3, the engine management system retards it back to 535, but when you push the button, it goes back to the original 585. So they don't find an additional magical 50 horsepower. That's how they control this. You push the button. If you're a pro driver, you have 6 opportunities for 10 seconds of an additional 50 horsepower. So it's used for being under attack or make a passing move. But David Chen made an interesting point. He also has double because he's an AM Plus driver. So he has double the drivers who are around him, which what made it difficult yesterday for Sean Dong to get past, because every time Sean made a move,
he was able
David Chen was able to cover because he had twice as many of those push to pass to use. That made it a little bit more challenging. But what David Chen said that was interesting to me was he said you use it more coming out of the slower corners because you've got more of that immediate push with that extra 50 horsepower very quickly. He said on the faster corners where you bring your flow through, the extra 50 horsepower is relatively negligible. Yep. So I thought that was an interesting point. No doubt Jake Dennis will have worked that out and he will be applying that knowledge too. And interesting that he has one more than the man in front of him. But he has to get past.
But just from what you were saying there, you can see David's really thinking about it and mentally bring it in as a strategy. You know, some of these drivers are more on instinct. They're not going to be quite as good on that mental side. So, again, that plays into things.
Well, that was one of the things that struck us during the year. So is this a replay, perhaps, of Sean Thong? Yeah. Well, that was frustrating. He's still shown in pit lane. No, he's not. Maybe he's gone back out again. You know, he has gone back out again. So this is live. So, yeah, a little bit of damage. But this is carbon fibre. In the good old days when these were steel guards, you could bash them out with a big hammer. Now, this is a great battle too. Sun Jing Zhu and Jeffrey Lee, they are battling further back for championships in both AM Plus and AM Class. So Sun Jing Zhu was right in the battle for the AM title. Unfortunately for him, Burt Biram Bhakti last time round, the Thai driver, I think he's made the field, has he? There was an issue. He was unable to get to his car this morning. So he is not in this field, but he will be crowned the 2017 AM Cup champion. So the man in the blue car, the Absolute Racing Milestone Team entry of Sun Jing Zhu, is likely to take the runner-up position. And, of course, they have taken over from Jeffrey Lee, who is the outgoing 2016 AM Cup champion.
Well, Sean, one other thing to tell you about, and that is the fact that Martin Rump, who'd been pushing hard with Alex Young for 5th place, has now got past the Malaysian driver, the 3-time champion, up until Alessio took over that crown from him. Alex, of course, does have 25 kilos in the car after his 3rd place finish yesterday. And next for him to defend against will be Alessio Picariello, who is now only about 1.3 seconds behind Alex Young as he tries to move up this field.
The solitary figure of David Chen, untroubled. Now, was that Martin Rump getting through there? So Martin Rump's now got through on Frankie. Well, there you go. We have to have a shout out to the champion racing team entry of Martin Rump. He has had a torrid year this year. No luck at all. It has been a real hallmark of his 2017 season. Last year, his first year in, same as Alessio Picariello, into the Cup. A very wide line for Alessio there. That was unusual. He did admit he does like to flow the car a little bit more, so he's using all of the circuit. But for Martin Rump, a 4-time winner last year, he only narrowly lost out in the championship. Here's a replay of the move. Oh, that was Frankie being Frankie, the consummate gentleman. He's left the door open and let Martin Rump fire on through there. So he is up to position number 4. And he has done a great job. Certainly at the start of this year, we collared him as being one of the potential stars of the season. But whilst Alessio Picariello had a fairly easy run through the first few rounds, by contrast, Martin Rump had nothing but drama.
Well, I'm going to stick my neck out and say that there will be more positions switching around between those 4 cars, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Martin Rump, Frankie.
This battle at the front, I'm sorry to cut you off, but
No.
The way Jake Dennis is approaching this at the moment, he's looking very, very aggressive. I think he's going to have a look somewhere. He's trying to set Mitch Gilbert up. Mitch is no slouch. He's no clown. Well, he is a bit of a clown at the best of times, but loves a laugh. But in all reality, he's a very clever driver. He's been overseas racing in various junior formula and open wheelers. And so too, Jake Dennis. In fact, Jake Dennis, I would have said, was one of the potential Formula One candidates for the next couple of seasons. He raced against the current crop of guys who have contracts with F1 teams for the next 2 or 3 years. He was at that level, but he said, clearly, there's only a couple of seats available in F1 every year. There could be 10, 20, 30 young guys with budget that could go after those seats. I elected to go looking for...
Push the pass there from Jake, perhaps looking for a move.
He elected to go looking for a drive with a factory and GT, and he's now a popular addition to the field with Audi Sport Customer Racing. That is very racy, and Mitch is covered. And this is the interesting point. He's covered. He's able to do that. The circuit layout is such that it makes it very difficult for Jake Dennis to get that additional performance. And you can see Mitch is covering now. He knows Jake is a little bit more aggressive perhaps than Sean Thong would have been on David Chen, and he's going to counter as much as he can. Oh, that's a little tight. Yeah, so that's very good driving too by Jake Dennis. He could have kept it down the inside. Potentially he may have been in the right, potentially he may have been in the wrong, but the outcome of that would have been quite bad. So that's a very experienced driver knowing when to button off and get onto the brake.
Well, what we've seen, we're about halfway through this race now, is Jake Dennis using the first push to pass for a long, long time. So he's exploring his options. It did definitely move him closer to Mitch coming into the potential passing areas. So perhaps we'll see that on the next few laps as well.
We talked about this yesterday with Sean Thong. The one thing that Jake Dennis has now done, and this could be very interesting, this could be a big strategy play. What he's done is he's set Mitch up so that Mitch knows what he's thinking.
Yep.
But a smart driver may also have set something up to take a different approach as this battle between Sun Jing Zhu and Jeffrey Lee goes on.
Both on the push to pass.
Coming out of the slower parts of the circuit. One of the additions this year for Jeffrey Lee that has helped him with his performances is that he's very well tied in with Alessio Picariello and has been a great supporter too of the young man's career. Of course, all these drivers driving for the Absolute Racing operation. But Jake Dennis may have set up Mitch Gilbert. He might have played this out to have Mitch think, right, I know what this kid's going to do. He's got no other options. I might be a little bit more relaxed at different parts of the circuit. And you can see he'd backed off a little bit. He'd given a little bit of a window for Mitch to just slightly pull ahead. And I wonder whether Jake Dennis has something bigger in play for the final couple of laps of this race.
Well, more than that, we've still got 7 to go. 11 in the books. The laps come thick and fast here at Zhejiang. They're so short. But these two have been battling all
Sun Jing's got in front, but Jeffrey's not happy about that. So the interesting thing here is that Sun Jing's got another 6 push to pass over Jeffrey, but Jeffrey's got 6 left. Sun Jing Zhu's got 5 left. And that is an interesting battle. Of course, these guys, again, they are part of the Absolute Racing stable. They are good friends, and I am very sure there's not going to be too much drama go on there. But they like to have a race, and that's the good thing about a circuit like this too. Closes up the field. You can have some good hard racing, and whilst, yes, they're going for championships, as Alessio pointed out on the grid to Sophie early in the piece, it's a single race. I just want to race. I just want to win. So they're focusing on that, but they're also having a good time.
Well, these two still with 4 push to passes. Sean, just one quick note. Sean Thong is back in the pit, so he was trying to get out, trying to score some valuable points in his championship quest to try and finish in those top 3 places. But unfortunately, it looks like that is him over. So he will probably be finishing 5th overall as things stand, which is a disappointment for the youngster.
Additionally for them too, the point that we make earlier about many of these drivers are doing double championships this year. One of the championships they're also focusing on is the Blancpain GT Series Asia. And in that championship, teammates Marchie Lee and Sean Thong are actually leading the championship points outright. The interesting point of this is they've got one event left, 2 more rounds, and they're right here at the Zhejiang circuit in just under a week. So they go straight back to the hotel tonight, get up tomorrow morning, and they are into mode for a fairly big championship here in Asia. And this mileage will be valuable for them because for a lot of their rivals, they haven't had the luxury of racing on the circuit yet. So they come in with as much knowledge as they can. So I'm sure the team thought, well, okay, he's lost second in the championship, Sean Thong. Let's send him back out again. And it's opportunity for him to get some more valuable knowledge of the circuit as they head into another important weekend.
Well, these two still have 4 push-to-passes each. They only started with 6, so we should expect to see some moves in the final 6 laps of this race. Absolutely no point in returning to the garage with any extra boost in the car. That's not going to help you at all. You can't cash them in for extra credit later. So definitely we'll see some covering moves from Mitch, perhaps some moves to try and pull away, and some attacks from Jake Dennis as we come into the final third of the final race of the season.
Now, given an Australian is leading this race, I've had some very important news from my biggest fan back there in Australia. Thanks, Mum. The biggest race in Australia, the Bathurst 1000, is currently underway, and they've had to bring the field under safety car for a kangaroo on the circuit. Now, you can't get any more Australian than that. Everybody's in there supporting Mitch Gilbert. He's going to take this one. Go, son. We're all behind you. Well, this is brilliant. This is for position 3. He didn't get off the line at the start. We're talking about there's no chance to overtake here. Oh, David Chen, that was an ace move. Yep, good luck, son. Come up the inside there, but I'm going to get you on the outside. We spoke about this earlier in the year when we saw the TSRT team first make its debut in the Cup, that we thought then David Chen was a very smart driver. He was always on the data, always thinking about things, always talking to people, respectful of the drivers he was against. In fact, he was a little awestruck by drivers like Sean Thong, Marchie Lee and Alex Young. But once he got into it and realised he was capable of racing with them, he's been very fast. He was on the front row for one of his first races, of course, at South Korea in the middle of the season, and he's taken that through to be the winner of round 9 of the championship just yesterday. So he's not going to be a pushover here. Oh, we've got some of the wildlife has joined us.
Not a kangaroo.
Welcome in.
Something a little bit smaller.
Well, it's all happening here at Zhejiang.
Well, Martin Rump has been absolutely flying. He didn't have the best of starts, but then he's put a bit of distance between himself and Frankie Chang, about 2.5 seconds since overtaking David Chen on the push-to-pass, as you can see. And interestingly, when Martin got through it, David didn't use the push-to-pass. Andy's got the 50 kilos in the car, just drove brilliantly to reclaim that position.
Here we go again. It's on at the front of the field. Oh, down the grass, the crossover. He can't get the crossover. Now, all 4 wheels off the circuit. We saw a potential penalty for that yesterday. So Jake Dennis may have to be careful. He may have to redress the situation and let Mitch back past. In fact, it was Mitch that was all 4 wheels off the circuit yesterday. Again, Martin Rump looks at the tail of David Chen. Now, that was nicely set up by Jake Dennis. Now, it looks like Martin's having a problem again. It'd be good to be able to go back to that shot. I know there's a battle at the front of the field, but it looked like the man who was battling there to try and get up to 3rd position, Martin Rump, has had some kind of potential issue coming through the exit of that corner. Now, that was well set up by Jake Dennis. As I said to you, I think he backed off a little bit, get Mitch to start to relax and not be under so much pressure, and when the moment came, bang, down the inside.
Well, Mitch Gilbert, if it stays as it is, will still claim 25 points, the maximum, because Jake is a guest driver, so he will still finish 2nd in the championship, but of course he wants that win. What now can Mitch do? Because the danger is that Jake creates a bit of space and drives away. He's been the quickest driver consistently all weekend long, and even though, because Jake has just used 2 push-to-passes recently, Mitch still has 4, so he's got a little bit more ammunition in the bag, but can he launch an attack back on Jake Dennis?
1, I don't think he needs to. 2, I'm sure what's going through his mind is, I don't know that move was on. I got collared for something like that and penalised yesterday.
Right.
And it is about all 4 wheels off the circuit. And that means the other side of the ripple strip going into the corner. If we saw a replay, we might be able to tell that that was in fact the case. Now, Jake may have judged that as being the only opportunity to actually get past somebody the calibre of Mitch Gilbert. So he will be aware of that too. He wouldn't have done it intentionally if he didn't think it was going to stick. We'll see how it plays out afterwards. It is one of the frustrations sometimes of having a big, hard passing move like that, and sometimes when there is contact, you don't always know at the end that the result, as per the checkered flag, is going to be the result for that round. But it could well have been clean. We couldn't see from the angle that we had, and there's been no replay since to see it. So it's a bit hard to judge how that'll play out. And again, we aren't the arbiters of fact. That comes to the race stewards.
That's right, and if you ask the drivers, they're never, ever in the wrong.
Of course, they're both in the right.
They're right. But of course, as viewers, you want to encourage those attacking moves, and so we'd like to see that action. But
I know that, mate.
Sometimes on these tight, twisty circuits, there just aren't the opportunities for overtaking that we sometimes have.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jake Dennis has done a good job, and I guess this is testament to his career too. And he did say to me earlier in the weekend that he's trying to impress upon Audi Sport that he has the ability to take them to a good result. So again, during the middle of this week we've just had at Chengdu Mid-Autumn Festival, there was a 3-day race meeting. The penultimate round of China GT, he took a victory. Oh, this battle between Sunjing Zhu and Jeffrey Lee goes on. Now, Jeffrey's had one of those years where he'd probably like to have been a little bit more involved in some of the racing. He's a pure racer. Yeah, he's gone in too deep into turn 1, and that's allowed the Sunjing Zhu's entry. Number 3, I think it is this weekend. They have a few number changes in that car because he does share that entry on occasion with Frankie Chang. They are very good friends, Frankie and Sunjing Zhu. And Jeffrey, of course, in the Absolute Racing team, the outgoing champion of the AM division from 2016, and he was in the AM Plus battle this year. He was second to David Chen, but certainly David Chen is the champion of that category. And here he is on screen, the round 9 winner, under fire from a man who won 4 times in season 2016.
So, Sean, just 2 laps to go, and another fantastic drive from the youngster David Chen. And it's worth saying again, he has that 50 kilos in the car. Martin Rump doesn't have anything. He's already defended successfully against one attack, was able to sneak the position back. Flashing lights from Martin Rump, perhaps trying to distract him in the bright sunshine, but worth anything at this point.
Martin Rump has had a very tough year, but I will make a couple of interesting observations. One, you can't pass around this circuit. He didn't make the start. So he effectively went into turn 1 in last position. What's he doing now? He's battling for position 3. Okay, Kaching. That again highlights why he started this year as one of the favourites. Secondly, he was also in the King's Racing entry at the last event in China GT as a teammate in the second entry alongside Jake Dennis with 1 lap to go by the look of things. And he went head-to-head with the young man who's leading this field. You know who was quickest? It was the young Estonian called Martin Rump. I mean, ultimately, in the fastest lap of a race, Jake Dennis got the fastest lap, but across that whole weekend or the whole event with China GT, Martin Rump was the man. Now, I don't think he's going to make the podium, sadly, and that would be just reward for a brilliant drive, but hey, just reward too for the man in the number 99 TSRT entry to be able to go back-to-back and be on the podium after winning yesterday as, again, an AM Plus driver. There is Jake Dennis for the Castrol Racing team run by WRT this year. It looks like he will take it through to victory. Jeffrey Lee just moves across out of the way. Has started so far all 69 races, or 70 races I think it is now, of the Cup over the last 6 seasons. So is the only driver to have done so.
Well, Jake using up his push to passes because he's got
one. It's the fastest lap now. let's just seal
remaining.
Everything. Pole position, fastest lap, and the race win. Thanks very much.
He's pulled miles away from Mitch Gilbert. That's Jeffrey Lee that he's just lapped in the back of screen.
Here he comes. Last corner for the young man from the UK. The number 19 Castrol Racing Team entry. And checkered flag time for Jake Dennis. Across the line, second for Mitch Gilbert. Good reward for the OD Racing Team driver. He will be, well, will he be second? Because that looks like it's David Chen's come across second. Frankie Chang seemed to be out of line there. He was in that middle group, was he? Or it may have been Jeffrey. Anyway, David Chen across the line in position 3, ahead of Martin Rump. Alessio Picariello, who's already been crowned the 2017 champion. We haven't seen much of KO Yu. Well, there he is on screen. Well, there you go. G'day, KO. Welcome back. And he takes the checkered flag and he will be classified in position number 8. Alex Young back to position 7. Kind of highlights the dramas that the Phoenix Racing Asia team entries have had this weekend. And I guess we'll hear some very interesting things after this race is concluded. And certainly keep up to date with the social media platforms and the Audi R8 LMS Cup website. All the news and information is there for you to follow what is going on. And we will let you know if there's any change to the outright result, of course. But so far, it looks like Jake Dennis has managed to make up for a tough start yesterday where he was involved in that opening corner incident. It eliminated a number of drivers, ultimately including Alessio Picariello and Martin Rump. And he's come back today. Didn't have the greatest of starts, but ultimately worked his way back to the lead of this race. And I would expect has set the fastest lap. No, he did not. Fastest lap, 1:26.327. That was by Mitch Gilbert. And Mitch dropped off the pace a little bit at the end, but he didn't need to. This guy doesn't get points. It doesn't affect his championship. But it would have been nice, I'm sure, for Mitch to take that victory and put that tick in a box.
Well, you're not usually complimentary about my sums, my calculations, Sean, but by my additions,
it does. Or somebody who can add numbers in the building.
Look like Mitch will come second overall. Frankie Chang was second coming into this race, but he will finish third. So a good podium overall for him. And then Alex Young and Sean.
Talking about the teams and the service teams, as Jake Dennis is getting a clap on the back from his WRT team entries. They're all Absolute Racing team drivers. So we're talking about the team value of being able to compare data and win races and do all that sort of thing.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3 for the Absolute Racing operation. And of course, last year, the championship won by Phoenix Racing Asia. It looks like Sophie will have the man who has won this race, young Englishman Jake Dennis, with her fairly shortly.
Now, of course, that was that one incident. I'll just ask you again. Do you think it was a fair move? It was certainly exciting to see from our point of view.
Yeah, if we could see a replay, that'd be great. We could make that assessment a little bit later, hopefully. But Sophie's down on the grid with the man who won this race, Englishman Jake Dennis.
Congratulations, Jack. Win the very last race of the whole season here in Zhejiang. So seems that the experience from yesterday helped you do a lot today. Would you like to talk us through the very beginning, especially your overtaking move of Mitch Gilbert?
Yeah, obviously we put it on pole this morning, but we had a 5-place grid penalty for yesterday. So starting 6th was always going to be a difficult task to win, but had a really good start. And then obviously the car was really good, the pace was good, and it was just, I felt like it was a matter of time until I got past Mitch. I took quite a risky strategy with the push to pass and used pretty much everything I had. And then went for a move into turn 1 and paid off. He gave me space, and yeah, it was a really good race. So big thank you to Castrol Racing and WRT.
Thanks a lot, Jack. And now time to back to our panel.
Well, Sean, interesting that Jake has definitely been the quickest driver throughout the whole weekend long. He did start in 6th, so very impressive for him to win after that grid penalty. But it was Mitch Gilbert who got the fastest lap of the race, so he also had that pace, even though once he passed him, Jake pulled away in the final lap, so it was a big margin by the end.
I think we were talking about it during the coverage. Mitch is no slouch, he's no deal either. He knew that second was up for grabs in the championship, and he's been able to do that. Sounds like Sophie's down there on the grid with Mitch Gilbert. Let's hear from the man from OD Racing.
Mitch, finished on second. Are you a little bit disappointed not being able to overtake Jack?
Yeah, I mean, my goal was to finish second in the championship. He doesn't score any points in the championship. I was trying hardest to stay in front as long as possible, but in the end, I think he wanted it quite a lot more than me. His move was quite optimistic, but it's okay, you know, at the end of the day. Finished second in the championship. I feel like I've been the second best to Alessio all year, so I'm happy to walk away with second. Especially after yesterday, I lost my 3rd place, so to be back on the podium is good.
Thanks a lot. Mitch, back to your guys.
Sure words there from Mitch. Of course he wants to win, but his goal was second in the championship. And he said, you know, it was an optimistic move, a bit of a euphemism there. He'll certainly be wanting to take a look again. But of course, he didn't want to risk anything and take them both out. He wanted to finish second overall more than he wanted to win this race.
Listening to Jake Dennis too, he said it was a little bit of an opportunistic move too, and well, a little risky. So it was a calculating point. But I mean, I guess Mitch is thinking, yes, I could close the door and I would probably be in my rights, but who knows what would happen.
It's not worth the risk.
Sophie's back down on the grid. Let's get a bit more of an update from down there.
David, who take win yesterday at the same time, 3rd place with 50 kg in your car. Lots of viewers definitely want to know what is your secret here in this circuit.
Yes, I think just to get the line right in the bumpiness, and for sure after yesterday also pick up some pace, learned a little bit more, but for sure I would say 50 kilos plays a huge difference. And then to balance it out, I have more push to pass, so almost can keep up with the front, but not with the first two. They're so fast. And then Martin was behind me, and I think if we're not that I saved the push to pass for the last 2 laps, he will probably get me.
Thanks a lot, David. Congratulations. Enjoy the weekend. Now time back to our panel.
Well, David got a little bit lost in the mix with that battle at the front, but Sean, with 50 kgs in the car, almost as good a performance to finish on the podium overall. This would be stunning in any other race weekend, but he's done so well this weekend, we now expect it. He is an amateur, and he's finishing third overall with 50 kgs in the car. Is that as good a performance, realistically, as his win yesterday?
Well, yes and no. I think it is, but interesting we talk about just what it means to come to your home race. It lifts everybody. We see invariably, I think, every 2 starts that Alex Young makes at Sepang, Malaysia, his home circuit, KL, he wins one of them. So it does give you that additional edge. And I think for David Chen and for the TSRT team, they are a full Chinese operation. Okay, they're supported by WRT from Europe, but they're running that car. Most of that crew are Chinese. And to have that victory here at home, I think that's given them that little bit of extra edge. And he's done a brilliant job. We've said that a number of times this year. Very calculating driver. And I think that is just desserts for his season to end on such a high.
Well, just a word about the man who finished 4th place, Martin Rump. It was a pretty good drive from him. We'll hear later, probably after the race, what happened to him on the start. But as he said, starting right from the back after that stalling on the grid. At least he was able to get away in the end and didn't have to retire. But very close to third. That would have been some race from him.
That would have been an epic result in the end. I mean, you've got to consider he's passed Marchi Lee, 2012 Cup champion. He's passed Alex Young, a 3-time Cup champion. He's probably passed Alessio Piccirillo in all of that too. He's the 2017 champion. To get himself towards the front of the pack and be in a position to battle with David Chen. But we saw David Chen do this yesterday under fire from Sean Thong. He made himself very wide and knew where to position the car, so he was able to retain that position. And yes, Martin got alongside and almost made a passing move, but just couldn't pull it off. So David Chen has been a real standout this weekend.
Now, a word about that 3-time champion, Alex Young. He finished 7th today. He will finish in 4th position overall. Obviously disappointing after 3 back-to-back wins. What do you make of his season as a whole?
He collared it after Suzuka, I think. He'd had 2 spins. He'd had an off and a spin at home in Sepang, then came back and won the next race, and then had a big spin at 130R, a circuit that he came into as the most experienced driver at Suzuka. And that put him right back in the field. And he said after that race, he threw his hands in the air and said, championship's over. We thought that was a little bit harsh, but the consistency of Alessio, in contrast, was so good. He was able to keep the points coming. And really, we came into the last round, I think, at Shanghai, and it was almost a foregone conclusion that Alessio was going to win the championship just after the halfway point. So good was the start to his year. So really, for Alex, it was all about race wins. He'll be frustrated that over the closing stages of the year, he was unable to do that. So anyway, we'll see how it goes.
Well, the man who finished in 6th position was Frankie Chang. He will be 3rd overall in the championship. He's been consistently one of the top standout performers in this championship. He hasn't, unfortunately for him, ever won the title. Became so close a couple of years ago, just 1 point behind Alex, of course. What do you make of his year? He did talk about the confidence coming back this year.
Well, I think that was a team thing too. When you talk to Mitch Gilbert and certainly from Frankie at the start of the year, having that additional data from the Absolute Racing team and use it and apply it to their performance was the way to go. And here he is, David Chen. Good round of applause for from the fans here for the local driver.
So we will be going through the podium celebrations here with Mitch Gilbert looking pretty happy. Jake Dennis, of course, takes the win, but will not be getting any points here as a guest driver. So those 25 points go to Mitch Gilbert, which means that he will be 2nd overall in the championship.
Vice Chairman, Federation of Modern Motorcycle Sports of Zhejiang， 有请浙江省汽车摩托车运动联合会副主席陈一鸣先生为冠军颁奖。
Just checking that this is okay.
I didn't see the move on Jake Dennis.
谢谢，感谢陈一鸣副主席。
Where did he get him? Where did Dennis get Gilbert? So one.
May I invite Mr. William Chen, Field Hunt Director of Gastro Lubricants. Please. 有请嘉实多油品重点客户销售总监陈宇先生为第2名颁奖。Congratulations. 谢谢陈宇先生。To present second prize, third place, may invite Mr. Yang Kai.
Yep. Okay, and there you have it. Mitch Gilbert punching the air. That's excellent. And congratulations to Jake Dennis and also to David Chen. Winner yesterday of round 9, third today, and a good result locally for him. Natalie Fong, 2013 Cup champion. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Mark Dreyer is joining us again. And what did you make of that? And seeing an international driver come in and not having it all his own way, he certainly did do a good job, and he'd be pretty happy to have a result like that too.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's been really competitive racing these last 2 days, and really nice to see the fight from Gilbert and Dennis. A bit of a shame that Dennis got past Gilbert as an absolute supporter, but yeah, it was a really good fight to the end.
Well, there's been some issues in the States with whether you sit, kneel or stand during the anthems, but good to see you standing during that. As an Australian, thanks very much for your respect as Jake took the victory on the podium there, Sean.
God save the Queen. But anyway, I mean, the point is, it was interesting to see that the passing move that Jake Dennis made was a tad sketchy. And one of the things that we've heard a little bit about this weekend and this circuit is it's very difficult to overtake. And what have you seen in watching the racing over the last couple of days?
Yeah, definitely. I think down the straights it looks quite wide, but as you approach the corners, the track seems to narrow a little bit. So with the bumpy nature of the circuit and the wide GT3 cars that the Audi R8 LMS is, then it makes it all that more difficult to overtake.
I mean, the other thing I think, of course, is yes, you have to play by the rules, and if it's a tight, twisty track, you just have to maybe bide your time. But you know, we want to see these attacks. It's fun to watch from a viewer's point of view. So the stewards probably won't be taking that into account. Have you had some frustrations over your career sometimes with stewards after the race? You think, well, I'm just trying to race here.
Generally not. With the Audi R8 LMS Cup, it's a sprint format, so the stewards generally understand, you know, the aggressive nature of the sport, and they generally are pretty fair. Unless you make contact or retaliation, then it's generally a penalty. But the stewards are pretty good in the sense that they let you race. So no, I don't see I don't see it to being too aggressive.
What were some of the contacts, the coming togethers that you had over the years?
Oh, there was many. A lot with Alex Young, but it didn't ruin each other's race. So you know, rubbing's racing, I find. So it wasn't the worst, but nice to see them having fun with the champagne at the moment.
Well, it's nice to have your observations of what the circuit's like, but it's going to be interesting to see how the GT3 cars run around here. Of course, we've got the Blancpain Series next weekend, but one thing that we heard early in the weekend from Alessio is that he thought it was a circuit that would suit an aggressive driver. You actually have to muscle the car, and he attributed that style of driving to Mitch Gilbert. You've seen the data from the two of them, you've spoken to them, you've seen them drive, you've raced against them. Do you think that's right? I mean, did you see that this weekend this circuit will reward aggressive driving?
Yeah, I think so. It's one of those circuits where Sector 1 and Sector 2 is a complex of corners, and you really have to force the car offline to prepare for the next sequence of corners. And with Mitch Gilbert's driving style, he really likes to use the front of the car and the brakes to really turn the car. And with this aggressive driving style, it just sets him up better for the sequence of corners. And yeah, that's why I think he ultimately has the edge over Picariello over this weekend.
Mitch talked in the press conference yesterday that he has a quirky driving style, different to a lot of the drivers. He says this track suits him. Just talk about what that means. You know, how is he different from a lot of the other drivers in terms of that style?
Well, generally we split drivers into two categories. So there are drivers which like to depend on the front end grip a lot, and then there are drivers which use the rear of the car to turn a lot. So the driver that uses the front end grip uses a lot of the brakes and uses a lot of steering movement to try to get momentum in the front of the car to turn. Whereas another driver would use the rear of the car, so the throttle, to try to get the car out of the corner. But Mitch is the first style, and Alessio is the second. So with the aggressive turning that Mitch puts in the car, it just helps that car set up for the next sequence of corners that little much better.
And of course, this is the last round of the 2017 championship. It's a very sad moment. Of course, we've got the gala this evening as the presentation. You've been to a couple of those. That'll be a fun night. But it sets up for season 2018, and that'll be the next step forward for the Audi R8 LMS Cup.
That's right, and Audi announcing yesterday that they're going to expand to bring in the GT4 category, and that will, of course, help the series. Just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think GT3 racing is getting more and more competitive, more and more professional. It's becoming like any other motorsports, any other developed motorsports, a bit more difficult to get in. So for younger drivers, younger people who want to get into GT racing earlier, GT4 is a really good category as a stepping stone. And the cars are very similar in setup. The engine, the drivetrain is generally the same, apart from a bit of aero devices. Then, it's a good learning tool for the drivers who want to progress into the Audi R8 LMS Cup or the Blancpain Asia Series to start.
It's interesting too that when you drove in the Cup, it wasn't a full, well, it was an outgoing GT3 spec car, so it wasn't the current GT3 spec car. Yes. This is a full GT3 spec car now, and one of the things that there is an addition for the field next year is it's not so much for the pro drivers, it'll be more for the amateur drivers. And there's been some discussion that, yes, they're a fantastic car, and the second generation Audi R8 is a fantastic race car, but it's a little bit more difficult for the amateur to extract the maximum performance from. So with GT4, it's a little bit more user-friendly, yes, but so too switching things around so that it's only the amateurs competing in the GT3 cars, which tends to even up the field and makes the racing a little bit more different. That's a new initiative too.
Yeah, I think so. GT4, like you said, is a really good tool to learn the GT3 because the cockpit is pretty much the same. And all the controls, all the functions of the car are pretty much identical, apart from the speed, since there's not as much aero. So it'll get the drivers more used to close racing, which we have a lot of in the Audi R8 LMS Cup. So I think it'll bring a lot of drivers, especially in this region of China, where motorsports is still very new. And I think it'll be an attractive package for a lot of people coming in.
Well, we're talking about the pros and the amateurs. One amateur who's making a case for himself to move up a category into the pros, of course, David Chen. Do you think that later in his career, still very young, do you think he could become a professional driver?
Yeah, I think so. Every time I've seen him out on track. I mean, he's only started the last 2 years. I've only seen him on track and on the timing screens the last 2 years. But every time I've seen him, he's been getting quicker and quicker. And with yesterday's win, I think his confidence as a driver will start to increase exponentially. So he'll get there, and I think he'll be a name to watch in the future in Asian GT racing.
Well, I've got a question for you, Mark. What's been your highlight for the 2017 season? You've seen all of them, but what's been the highlight in 2017?
You know what, it's hard to pick one highlight, but Alessio has been so dominant this year. We've had some very, very close titles over the last few years, and that of course is exciting, but to come from that competitive race and just dominate the field from so early on. We were 2 race weekends in and everyone was saying it's already over. Yeah. I mean, that just shows you how good he's been.
Including the reigning champion and the most successful driver in the Cup. He'd given up after a couple of races.
That's right. And to come back from the disappointment of the last weekend last year where he thought he had it and then it ended up in the steward's box, yeah, no one really wants to see that. But to put that away and come back and work hard over the winter and do what he's done this year, that for me has been the best.
I'll pose the same question to you, Adley Fong. What's been your highlight from this season? Of course, you're a little biased being an Absolute racing driver, and we were just saying first, second and third in the championship for Absolute, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, I mean, like Mark said, Alessio's been so dominant this year. As I mentioned yesterday, it was the move in Shanghai he did on Dries Vanthoor that really, really caught my attention. The reason being because he was fighting for the championship. He knew it was on the line. Yeah. He needed to finish in front. But, you know, having that much pressure before you even start the race and then being able to do such an aggressive move so freely just shows the capability and the capacity he has as a racing driver. And like you said, from the blow of last year, losing the championship from a steward's decision, yeah. I thought he would have taken a huge blow and it would have been demotivating. But he seems to have come back, found another step, and found even more speed. When I raced against Alex, he was a really, really good benchmark. He's a good all-rounder. He's quick everywhere, even in the rain, even in the dry. So to be able to pull away from Alex Young like that is something special we're witnessing.
And I think, too, there was also a whole maturity, as in, he said at the start of the year, we'd seen all the other rivals, Martin Rump and a whole other bunch of drivers, had raced other things in the off-season. Alessio's like, well, I haven't. I've just been fit. And he said, I've been trying to get my brain right. Everyone was talking about others. Would Alessio not having been behind the wheel of something, will that stop his season? Maybe he should have thought about doing something. He didn't care. I'm not the favourite, I don't mind. And he went out the gate the first race, complete maturity. By the end of that weekend, it basically hosed everybody It's like I didn't need to say anything. I just did my job, and that's all he did all year. And it was probably no surprise that with 2 races still to go in this season, he was the 2017 Cup champion.
Well, we had some highlights off the track as well. Of course, Mitch Gilbert has been a fantastic addition. He's a bit of a character, and I think a lot of people down in the paddock have enjoyed him being around here. We've also had Marchie Lee saying he still got it after post-race. That was a big moment. But on track, what about you? What was the highlight for you?
I think that certainly was the highlight for me, was Alessio's performance this year. But I think one of the other ones, and we're looking at some of the action from during this season, 2017, make a win with a team that is based here too in China. So I think that is something you need to take away from this season as being one of the highlights.
Now let's widen the discussion a little bit. Who do you see as some of the young drivers, posing this question to both of you, some of the young drivers who can move on, perhaps bounce back after maybe a disappointing campaign, but take the next step next year? Sean Thong, of course, is one of the candidates. Where can Alessio go from here? Adley, start with you.
Oh, that's a difficult question. I think a lot of the drivers in Asia have shown a lot of potential. I think David Chen is the first example here. Taking the race win yesterday, he would definitely come back stronger next year. It'll be interesting to see what Sean does next year. Having shown quite a lot of speed this year in Blancpain and in Audi R8 LMS Cup, there's not much room to improve in terms of category over here in Asia. But yeah, I'm looking forward. Sean also has a younger brother, Jasper, who's racing in TCR at the moment. And I'm looking forward to see how he'll progress. He's only 17, so
he's
lots of potential.
Pretty precocious as well. He'll tell you every opportunity that he's faster than his older brother. Yeah. We've yet to see them go head to head.
Yes, yes. So hopefully that opportunity will come for Jasper next year, and then it'll give Sean a hard time. So I'd like to see 2 brothers fighting against each other. That would be entertaining.
I'm not sure their father, Casey Thong's quite ready for that, because that could get very, very interesting. But yes. What a season it has been in 2017. Thank you, Adley Fong. Fantastic to have you join us. And Mark Dreyer, sadly, for us, that's a sign-off.
That is. We'll see you all next year. We'll. Actually, we're just going to...
Well, they want to see a bit more of us. There's no way they want to cut away from this. It's just fantastic.
A little bit more. Well,
why would you? This is the most entertaining part of the season.
Well, Sean, one more question for you then. In terms of some of these drivers that you think can kick on next year, what are you expecting to see?
Well, it'll be a new era, I think, of the Cup in season 2017, and that's a good thing. The market changes, things move around, but again, I keep coming back to this weekend. Here we are at a brand new circuit in China, won by basically a brand new team from China, with a young driver from China who's only a couple of years into his racing career. That's got to attract a lot more local support to actually get things to start to really kick on. And you've got to move with that. So changing things to GT4, focusing more on amateurs, I think it's a brilliant way to go for the future.
Well, that leads to the next question. How much is this series, but also, the whole of Asian racing, how much is it now on the global map? Jake Dennis comes over here. People, of course, are watching to see how he does. There are some of these Asian, but also Chinese drivers making a name for themselves globally. How much do you think the sport has grown from a global sense over the 6 years?
I think in China especially, it's been growing so rapidly. We didn't have a GT championship, a proper GT championship before 2010. So now we have, the Audi R8 LMS Cup, we have China GT, we also have Blancpain, and there might be even more championships coming up within the next few years. So I think growth is really good. Thank you for all the manufacturers that create these great GT3 cars that create a great platform for us to race on. And I think, like you said, it'll attract a lot of drivers. We have drivers in TCR, which are really performing well, young Asian drivers. So I think, the natural progression would be next to GT3. And I'm excited to see how they'll progress and how they'll get on.
Well, it's good, too, to have that opportunity with the development going back to 2018. Instead of coming in having to face an Alex Young and a Sean Thong and a Marchie Lee and all those sorts of things, if you've got a whole range of new young guys like a David Chen coming in and they're all racing together, there's a chance. You're not settling for 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and if on a good day and everybody else stops, you might make the bottom step of the podium. You've got a whole raft of guys you'll attract that know they can be race winners in a high-profile championship like this.
But it's been good to see, the interest from the European drivers, and of course we had the link up with Phoenix over a big team over in Europe come over and support this series, and I think that just goes to show, how much it's more of a global sport now.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of attention, especially in Europe. Alessio has done his great performance, and he obviously got 2 drives in ADACD GT Masters, so there's a lot of progression.
Good stuff. Well, Adderley Funk, thank you very much. I hope you can stick around to enjoy the gala. Sean, it's been a pleasure all year. We'll be back again. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching all year long. We'll send you over to the press conference and see you back in 2018.